Welcome to the Happy Hour podcast with Streamline Woodshop, sponsored by no one. We no longer have a sponsor, and that's going to happen, right? It's tough being a woodworker trying to sell hydration, and you guys weren't going out there and buying the hydration. You didn't buy the hydration, we lost the sponsor. So if you're looking to sponsor a podcast, somewhat not even a little bit successful one, slide up into my DMs. You might notice if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm in a new location. This is my little office nook. I had to move from the bar because we were having people over, and then Christmas is coming, so you got me in my little work closet. So thanks for not making fun of it. I gotta tell you what, hopefully you can't hear him, but if I could take leaf blowers, more importantly, take the person that's using a leaf blower, and I could take that leaf blower and shove it right up their butt and then let it go, that would make me a happy man. I'm lucky enough to live in a very nice neighborhood. Most people have an acre plus of property, and especially around this time of year, hours of leaf blowing is happening. Hours. They don't bag their grass. They will blow all the grass out to the curb because there's a service that'll come and pick it up for free. And right now, I am on hour 2 of just one neighbor's yard, straight leaf blowing. And I know this company, they're going to pop on over to their neighbor's neighbor and do their lawn next. Listen, it's November 2024. And November, as some of you may know, but I bet a lot of you don't, is Indigenous Peoples Month. It's important that we, honor that? Pay note to it. It's Indigenous Peoples Month. Remember that, November, Indigenous Peoples Month. So for this episode, we are talking to one of Reno's finest, a man who originally got on the social media and did not want to say his last name, so he went by Randal Randal. He has since moved past that, but you know what? I'm going to honor it. Randal Randal it is. Randal Randal is a Native American. He is based, I believe he said his tribe, well, you'll listen, you'll learn, but I believe based in Northern California. Randal is a husband, father of 5, woodworker. More importantly, though, Randal's got a story to tell. Randal has lived many lives and has overcome some great obstacles. Some he put on himself, and some that were put on him. And he's alive to tell these stories. I hope you enjoy them. But more importantly, he's taken a lot of negative in his life and he's turned them around to give back. Randal does a lot for charity, a lot for children, and just all in all, great dude. Have a listen. So, yeah. Randal, that's what I call you. You're yes, Randal Randal on Instagram.
Yeah.
Does that mean anything?
No, it's just me being a jackass and not wanting to put my last name on anything. At first, when I first got into social media, like 10 years ago or whatever. So now I've got people all over Reno that call me Randal Randal.
I dig it though. It's a cool name to say twice.
Yeah, it's fucking or Randall with 1 L.
Well, that I wrote it twice, and I'm like, I should go look to see if he spells it with 1 or 2. So yeah, I didn't insult you by doing 1. You're out in Reno?
Yeah. Westernmost Nevada.
Born and raised?
Yeah, I've been here my whole life, aside from a brief 4-year stint in California.
Where'd you go in California?
In California, well, I went and stayed there for 90 days one time in a treatment center. And
I was gonna say
then,
that sounds like a sentence when you have
yeah,
90 days.
yeah, a very exact vacation.
Yeah.
Um, I went to a treatment center in Palm Springs when I was 20, shit, 25, 26, I think. And then I ended up out there um, in San Francisco for like 2.5 years.
After the treatment center,
Yeah, after the treatment center,
or you came back?
I was clean for like 3 years, and then a whole slew of stuff happened, and I went to go to treatment in San Francisco like 5 years later, 4 years later, and I was about 5 years later, and then I got kicked out of that treatment center, and then I was just homeless in San Francisco.
It's a good place to be homeless.
It was a lot easier than being homeless in Reno. I know that.
Yeah, yeah.
Just in like terms of survival and being able to like maneuver around the city. Everything in Reno is so it's not really like a walking city. Everything's like
Right.
pretty far apart, and the seasons are so brutal here. It's either crazy cold and snowing or 103, 104 degrees. So,
Are you open to talking about why you were in treatment
oh
specifically,
yeah,
or
no, yeah, we talk about it. I mean, it's a big reason why I do most of the stuff I do now is all of that, you know. Um, so I went to treatment the first time. I obviously grew up just like any kid does when they're into punk rock and music and stuff and skateboarding. I just grew up partying. I partied a lot, and it wasn't until I got hit by a car skating when I was 16, 17ish. And when I finally had to go to the doctor because of it, they just kind of loaded me up with painkillers and all of that. So I realized that addiction was a real thing when I was like 21 and tried to stop taking everything. And
mm,
then that just kind of stuck with me until I decided to get clean for real at 25. I wanted to get custody of my son, and I knew I'd have better odds of doing that if I was in better shape. I wasn't really at the
yeah,
life ruining stages of addiction at that point, but things weren't good, you know. So, and that was really good. I mean, the at Michael's house in Palm Springs, it wasn't just the 30 days. I was just going for the 30 or 60 days just to get away from my surroundings because I was fully fully convinced that my issues were the things around me and not so much whatever the hell I had going on. But I lucked
yeah.
out and had a my counselor was this native guy that was native to one of the tribes down there in Southern California, and he cracked me and just helped me work through a whole bunch of stuff. And a lot of those things I learned then I still carry today. They were a pretty big deal. All that stuff that I learned there and kind of breakthroughs and all that. Um, and that
Where you did like you learned more or less that it wasn't all chemical. It was
Yeah,
more
it was a whole lot
you.
of my childhood, a whole lot of me not realizing it was all the things that had happened to me or things I had put myself through, and just not ever processing anything really. Just kind of
Yeah,
bottling it up and kind of pushing forward, and that only works for so long before everything kind of boils to the top and your life's the shit
yeah.
show.
When I imagine it's not easier. I never went into the opiate world, but I know many that have, and it grabs you even if you didn't want it to.
Yeah, it's such a terrible thing, man.
Yeah. So you did the treatment, learned about yourself, but then left and were just homeless. Is it you didn't have anyone to go
And
back to,
no,
or you
actually,
didn't want
when
to go back?
when I got out the of treatment that time, I came back to Reno and everything was really good. I stayed clean and sober for I want to say it was 3 years. I was clean and sober, and then I got in this random fight at a casino in Sparks which is like Reno's little neighboring city. On Fourth
Hmm.
of July, these guys tried to jump me in a bathroom. Everyone's drinking and stuff. So, and I dislocated my patella and tore my meniscus and my PCL. So
Damn.
they gave me some pain meds, and I wasn't trying to take them. And my girlfriend at the time was like, "Ah, you've got this. You've been good for this many years." And then, of course, one turned into a handful the next day, and then so on. And
Yeah.
at that juncture in my life, I was right. I was back and forth with court trying to get custody of my son, and then I put a relapse on top of it. And then I got this terrible advice from this attorney that said, "Look, you're probably never going to get custody of your son, so you need to stop spending the money and time." And at that point, I was like, "Well, if I can't get custody of my son, then what the hell am I even doing here?" And that's when shit went downhill fast, and that's when I started using heroin and then shooting heroin and meth and everything else. And that's when the whole life ruining thing kind of came into play. And as soon as needles got involved, everything was a shit show. Just
Where was your son?
he was with his mom. Um,
And you were trying to take him from her?
I was just trying to get custody, just 50-50 with her, but yeah, but she was, she had her own reasons for what she was doing, and is is fine now. But then it was heartbreaking. I was
Yeah.
it was the only thing I really had left clinging on to that really mattered enough for me to keep my shit together. And when that was out the window, or so I thought it was anyway, I was very ignorant to the court system and how that all worked in the first place. Yeah, I
Hmm.
just dove off the deep end, and then had a really bad overdose in my parents' house when I was like 28, 29. Overdosed, and my dad had to give me mouth to mouth for 15, 20 minutes until the paramedics came. And it was just a horrible scene. First of all, I'm overdosing in my parents' house, and I've got this like
Yeah.
22-year-old girl with me that just, it was one of those rock bottom moments. Everyone else could see it anyway. And
Yeah.
at that point, um, in the hospital, you know, they uh, they had to give me they gave me a ton of Narcan, but they had to give me air to kind of get me moving again. And then that next day, I overdosed again, and at that point, my parents obviously were like, "Dude, we can't do this. You're gonna die, and we can't, like, unless you're gonna get help, like, you gotta go. Like, we can't harbor it anymore because all we're doing is helping you." So at that point, I kind of
Yeah.
lingered around Reno for 6 months or so, and then we found a treatment program that was native ran, and um, was all indigenous people that went to this treatment program in San Francisco, and my tribe was willing to pay for it up front, which was really really cool. So we went up there to go do that, and I was there for, I don't know, a week I think, and I had this really bad abscess on my wrist. Um, so I had to go to the hospital, and they had to drain it and everything else, and I had to go get my antibiotics the next day. This kid, they were like, "Look, you got to you got to go get it yourself. Just take someone that's been in the house for at least 30 days." So I found this kid that's been in there for 30 days. We left, and as soon as we left, he split and went and ran off and did his own thing. I find the pharmacy, go back to the house, and they're like, "Oh, you can't come in." That kid had already gotten in trouble. They gave me all these reasons as why I couldn't come in. I was like, "Well, where do I go? Because I don't live here." And they're just like, "Well, you're gonna have to come back and talk to your counselor." So I did that every day for a week until finally they were like, "Look, you're not coming back." Um, they gave
Wow.
me like 4 packs of cigarettes that I had in one of my jackets, and I was like, "Where's the rest of my stuff?" It was kind of a, I can't say for certain because I wasn't obviously, I was clean at the time, so I remember it very clearly, but I don't know what they thought. I never actually got to talk to the counselor or anybody, but at that point,
Mm-hmm.
um, they had already contacted my parents and they told my parents that I left and didn't come back at all. So my parents
Interesting.
were like, "Dude, we're done. You figure it out. However you need to figure this out, you're gonna have to do it on your own," which is fair. I don't, I would have never expected them to be involved for as long as they were. Honestly, like that's such a horrible thing. I can only imagine how gnarly that must have been for them. But so then I was just
Yeah.
in SF and I was able to get my hands on a guitar. So that's kind of how I survived out there. I played guitar and sang in the BART stations, and I stayed clean for like 8 days after I got kicked out of the house, and then uh, relapsed and just kind of did that out there for 2 years. Two
Man,
years in between all up and down the Bay Area.
it's a bummer to hear. It's a bummer to hear that you were trying to get back into and showing that you want to be there, and then they still put you away. But then also hearing your perspective of understanding potentially why, and understanding why your parents might not want you back, and um,
Yeah.
it's sad on both levels. It's like you got somebody providing you help, and you want it, but they don't want to give it to you anymore, and you don't know where to turn. It's
Yes.
honestly, it's amazing you stayed clean for 8 more days after that, like you were still trying.
Yeah, I had made it through the hardest part of getting off opioids, heroin, painkillers. That first 4 days, if you can make it through the first 4 days and get through the sickness,
Mhm.
get if you can get through that, then the rest is just a mental game. I was able to kind of do that, but then when I wasn't able to go back, and my parents were like, "We're done," and I was like, "Well, shit, I'm done too. I guess then we're just gonna do this now."
Yeah. Well, it sounded like the whole journey of that was points of being done, and, uh, back-to-back overdoses, the accident, odds are slim on that one. It's a little subconscious, maybe not purposeful completely, but, you're definitely crying for help.
Yeah,
And it was
certainly,
awesome of
certainly.
your tribe to step up and offer it for you.
Yeah, it's great, and that ended up. I ended up finding out these last few years since I've been more involved with a lot of these nonprofits and some of these bigger organizations that it's actually been a bit of an issue these last this last 5-10 years where a lot of these these rehabs, which are all they're all basically I forget the word, um, but they're all dry rehab, so they're not like pharmaceutically assisted. So like some places you go and
Mhm.
they'll give you Suboxone or medication for DTs if you're an alcoholic. A lot of these are dry rehabs. They're more or less just halfway houses. And what a lot of them have been doing, they're accepting this money from a lot of these tribes up front for people, and then the person will just have disappeared from the roster and the family never hears from them again in some cases. um, and then they just kind of cycle in another person because they're getting paid up front and they get the money
Right.
from the tribe regardless. And I'm not in any position to say that that's what happened to me, but I know that it's a thing that happens. um,
Well, I mean, the rehab business is a business, through and through, especially like the higher class ones. I mean, there's government kickbacks, so like all they really need to do is get you there, and they're getting
mhm.
money from other avenues. So although you're not certain, I can guarantee, your slot was filled, that,
Yeah,
job's done. They got
that's
what they
right.
needed from you basically.
Yeah.
They just assume you relapse and come back. on a
Yep.
new contract or whatever that would be, pay for the next 90 days, but this one's over. We got somebody in your slot because they're
That's
also only allowed to have
that's
a
right.
certain number of beds and
Hmm.
rooms. It's a dirty
That's right.
business.
It is. It's really sad because there's so much pain. There's so much pain in the world of, you know, being an addict at all, let alone the world of like being an intravenous heroin and meth addict. Like it's sad. It's super sad, and
Yeah.
it's just kind of the way it is. I mean, I think people get desensitized after dealing with junkies and drug addicts and stuff. They deal with it so much they become desensitized to the point where it's like, look, this is just my job, so I am just going to fill this slot, and if you fuck up, you're out. Fuck off. You're done.
Hmm.
So I try to understand. It still sucked, and it was it was
Yeah.
so goddamn scary to just be homeless in San Francisco. I had no friends out there. I didn't know. I knew the city as a tourist. I didn't know the city
Right.
like somebody that lived there, let alone somebody that survives on the streets there. And I was lucky enough to meet this kid um, really early on that was about my age that kind of took me in and kind of showed me the ropes on how to survive out there and how to stay safe. So, but he ended up dying of a gunshot wound in the middle of the day at the United Nations Plaza Park a couple years later.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was a crazy thing. I mean, and all the ugliness of that world and the struggle and survival and all of that, there was a great amount of peace I found in. I was no longer really. I didn't feel like I was directly hurting anybody. I wasn't taking from anyone. I wasn't. I was just playing my guitar for the money that I needed, and I just kind of minded my own on a day to day basis. So it that felt good to have that sort of peace of mind and to kind of fulfill that little that little punk rock dream of mine of just running around the streets playing music. I kind of got
Hmm.
that helped to get that out of my system at least. Um, but it was terrible for sure.
Yeah, I was gonna say
It
it's. I
fucking
mean, you
sucked.
you found some happiness, but really, your happiness was you were removing the burden that you felt of like putting the ones that loved you in
Yeah,
pain because they're watching you in pain.
yeah, that
And
that's
so like you
exactly
just
it.
kind of remove this reminder that like you're making other people unhappy, and so now you just kind of focus on yourself. Um, what got you like? What was the point that got you back to Reno,
Oh man,
or at least back to the area?
that was it was so weird. I was there for those few years, and at one point my mom had contacted me and said, "Hey, your cousin said that you can go up to the reservation and live with her because my tribe's reservation is Northern California, just south of Eureka, right, like right on the coast. Um,
What's the tribe?
I'm Wiat, the Bear River Band of Rounderville or Rancheria or Rancheria or whatever. Um, yeah, up there, all the coastal natives just before Oregon. So, and I considered it, and what actually sent me up there was there was this night where this all this commotion happened at the park, and this guy overdosed, and these people were trying to rob him, and I fought these people, and I pulled this guy out of this overdose, and some guy gave me a bunch of acid, and the next day when I woke up, I took some of the acid. It didn't kick in for like 2 hours, so I took the other one, and then the first one kicked in, and then I was just on a hot one. And by the end of the day, I got this weird vibe where I was like, all right, well, I think I've kind of lived enough. I think I'll trade all my stuff for some dope, and I'll just go take care of business down on the beach. Uh, and I did that, And then I woke up a day, 2 days later on the beach, and I called my cousin. I was like, "Hey, can I still come up there?" Um, and she, thankfully, she was like, "Yeah, jump on a bus, and we'll meet you in Eureka." They didn't meet me in Eureka. I ended up walking the 25 miles or whatever it was from Eureka to Lolita. But either way, the
Okay.
house was there, and they took me in, and I dry detoxed there. And started working for the tribe, and it was, I wouldn't say it was about 30 days. And I wanted to come home to Reno to see everybody. I hadn't seen my family in those 2 years and really talked to anyone. So these girls from Reno drove up, and they were going to drive me back down so I could see everyone, and then I was going to go back to the reservation. And they came and got me that morning, and I drove. I've told them I'd drive like halfway back, and on the drive, it started raining really hard, and those roads, I think it was Highway 21 or something, they're so there's such bad switchbacks all the way around the mountain, and there's no guardrails or anything. So at one point, we're coming around a turn. A guy was in the middle of the two lanes. When I swerved, we hit a bunch of mud that had washed down in the road. We spun out and went off the cliff.
Good
And
God, dude.
we went off the cliff, and as we're going down, I didn't have my seatbelt on, so I'm all over the cab of the SUV, and we hit a tree eventually, and it ripped the driver's door off. And at that point, then I got slingshot out, and I was bouncing down the canyon as the car was rolling behind me. Eventually, it caught up to me and rolled over me and kind of twisted me up in these trees, and it broke my right femur in like 14 places. It just snapped it over, like running like a straw through your fingertips, and powdered my pelvis, broke both my hips, all my ribs. It ruptured my spleen, crushed my heart and my left lung, and it crushed my skull 9 inches across my head. And just kind of That's kind of what saved my life, was the fact that it popped a big softball sized chunk of my skull out. So my brain, when it swole, it wasn't trapped inside my skull. And
Jesus.
um, the car made it like 400 feet down into the canyon and finally stopped rolling. And the girls found me under a bunch of trees and mud and shit. And my right leg, my right heel was under the back of my head. So it was like broken and twisted up behind me. And luckily, when we went off the cliff, there was a guy behind us, and he saw us go off, and he called right away. So we only had to wait for care flight for like 30 minutes, I think. And in that time, though,
Dude,
I knew
your heel is in the back of your head. 30 minutes
it's a
is
long
a
time.
fucking
It's a
eternity, dude.
long, long time.
Yeah.
And the girl I was with, because I couldn't move at first, and they pulled this stuff off me, and she pulled my leg out from under me and pulled it straight. And at that point, I could grab onto something, so I just kept trying to get up. And every time
Mm,
I'd get up, I was just losing a massive amount of blood. So she finally
yeah.
took her sweater off and wrapped it around my head and sat on my chest, so I'd stop trying to get up. And once I calmed down, um, I knew I was dying. I could feel it. It was the aside from just the massive amount of pain that I was feeling, it was the strangest thing. And I was kind of coming to terms with it. We were just laying there waiting for care flight, and when care flight got there, they rolled down the canyon, and right when they started kind of strapping me onto the gurney is when I bled out, and that's when the next thing I remembered, I was in the hospital. But my heart stopped. They had to bring me back, and I was on life support for a day, um, and then I was semi-conscious by like day 3, I think. But every time I woke up, because the brain damage that I got was all frontal lobe, so my short-term memory was gone. So every time I'd
Hmm.
wake up, I'd fall asleep, wake up, and my last memory was 2.5 years prior, 3 years prior in Reno. So I'd be like, "Where's my girlfriend at the time? Why am I by myself?"
Yeah.
Like they'd have to come in and tell me what happened. Um, every time I fell asleep, it was fucking brutal. But the plan from the hospital was I was to um, I was going to be in a wheelchair for up to minimum a year and a half, and then as I rehabbed, I would rehab onto a walker, and then eventually a cane, and the cane's where I was supposed to stay. Like there was never going to be there was never going to be any more skateboarding, no running, jumping, karate, kicking, probably no dancing, or no rhythmic dancing at least. Um, so that was brutal to hear. And then there was obviously the possibility that I might not be able to walk again, just because there was so much that was just from my hips down was just completely obliterated.
Hmm.
Um,
But
and my
brain
mom,
wise, there was no worries apparently.
yeah, brain wise, there was a possibility of like some aneurysms just because there was a lot of swollen vessels and stuff, but the frontal lobe damage, they said I should recover completely. I think it was like at the 6 month mark, and that was uh that was right on time. At 6 months is basically when everything kind of started to get normal again. I'd stop tying my shoes over and over again, or like just doing silly,
Yeah.
because it messes with your decision making too. Your conscience is all fucked up, so you make really weird decisions. And
Yeah. Were you then just slowly starting to remember everything that happened?
yeah, yeah. At first, I had zero recollection of it, but then they would tell me, and I would start to kind of remember it. And by the time I would be falling back asleep, I would have remembered the whole incident and the years before it. And then I'd wake up and it would all be brand new again. And
Jesus.
that only lasted probably for like a week or two. Um, but my mom and dad came up and got me out of the hospital and brought me back to Reno. And in my brain damaged state, I decided that I was going to run away from my parents' house, and I I left, and the girl that I had started talking to before I left the hospital was this girl that I knew from like 15 years prior, and she was like this Reno famous girl that everybody knew because she was cool. She helped run one of the tattoo shops, and everybody knew her as Indian Emily. And I started talking to her, so I was trying to hang out with her, trying to be a charming handicapped fella, and my so I left and went to where she was working at the time, was the Sands, and she came up to my room and was like, what are you doing, dude? Like you're gonna die. You can't walk. You're obviously probably not gonna try to stay clean. Like, because that was the one of the worst parts about the accident, actually, was I had gotten clean again, and then I woke up and I was getting pumped back full of Dilaudid. And at that point it was
Yeah.
necessary. But still, I kind of was almost putting me right back where I was at mentally and like emotionally anyway.
Yeah.
And
I mean, you're getting a taste of something that your brain wants, your
yeah.
body wants now.
Yeah, and
Uh,
at 30 days,
Slippery slope.
that that repeat that you have in the back of your mind when you do get clean, your mind is still telling you like, I know how to fix this, I know how to fix it, we know how to fix this.
Hmm.
And that doesn't go away for a year, 2 years. I mean, it takes a long time for that little voice to kind of leave your mind. She she was like, okay, dude, I'll stay with you and help you, but you can't, you got to have your shit together. You got to be, you have to want to get better for real. And In that moment, I was like, okay. So we stuck together and went from the hotel room to a 1 bedroom apartment with her aunt. We shared a couch. And at 6 weeks or so, I stood up. And I wasn't supposed to even be rehabbing into standing up for another like year. Um,
Wow.
so I stood up and I started shuffling around her aunt's house for little bits, and I would sit back down because right right when I was still in the hospital, the idea of not being able to walk or that freaked me out so bad. I was picking my legs, kind of bending them at the knee and then pushing them back down. So I was just trying to make them move at all. So I started pretty quick, and at that 6 week mark, it another brief thing. She was a caregiver prior to us hooking up, so she had some physical therapy training in some sense or another. She was at
Hmm.
least able to help me kind of rehab safely and not dive in too fast.
Well, if she wasn't a caregiver prior, she certainly became one. I mean,
She
just even
did.
taking you on as
She
a
certainly did.
as something. So she saw something.
Yeah, and I it's so funny, man. Like we she ended up becoming my wife. So I was somehow able to charm her, whether it was through pity or something. I don't know. Maybe my she liked the
Yeah.
wheelchair. I'm not sure what it was, but it worked. It fucking worked. And um, at 10 weeks, I was fully walking, and I got a job out at the Tesla factory out here because I knew it was going to be pretty light work. It was just going to be mostly walking. Um, and just kind of rehab myself back to the point where I could get back to real work. And we slowly worked our way from there to my mom's house, and then from my mom's to where we're still living today. And shit, we got married. Got married like 3 or 4 months in. I think there's 7 years we've been married now. Yeah,
7 years, if
7 years.
I'm not mistaken, from your Instagram, you have a litter of children as well.
A small litter, just five,
Yeah,
just five
just
kids.
five. Well, I don't know what else is there an actual number to a litter? You have more than the average. How
I
about
think I
that?
have. I think I have maybe less than the average if you're thinking in terms of puppies, but probably twice the average if you're thinking in terms of children. Uh,
Okay, I did say
yeah.
litter, but I was thinking in terms of human beings. Uh, I know that
Yeah.
in a short period of time, you popped them out.
Yeah. We got to it. We already had my wife had my stepson from a previous relationship, and I had my son. Which another beautiful thing of getting off the pain meds and rehabbing. I got off the pain meds I think 3 months in after the accident, and a rehabbing to the point where we were doing well was I was able to go back to court and get custody of my son, which
That's
was kind
awesome,
of
dude.
the catalyst of all the shit show that I kind of created. I was able to at least fix that, and yeah, then we had my um, my daughter Eva, and then Lily shortly after, and then we adopted my wife's niece.
Oh wow.
So yeah, so we've got from 3 years old to 16.
So you got your
Uh,
own little tribe now.
yeah, yeah, it's awesome. It's really cool. Better.
What brought you into the woodworking world then?
So that was early on in my, geez, it was my first actual W-2 job. As a matter of fact, I I was 16 because I moved out of my parents real young. I moved out as soon as I got kicked out of high school. There was a fight. They asked me to not, please not come back. So I got my GED and just moved out and decided I was going to grow up. I found this cabinet shop that needed a finisher, or a finisher's apprentice rather, and they allowed me to be 18 for 2 years until I could sign off on my W-2. And then I learned how to
Nice of them.
finish.
I'm sure they paid you in a way that made that a good deal for them to
Yeah,
respect.
yes they did.
Yeah.
Yes, they did. But
Yeah.
then, Jesus, I mean, makes me feel kind of old saying back then, but I mean, back then, $9 an hour was enough to live off of for a single guy.
Yeah.
I felt like I was balling anyway.
I
I
mean,
really did.
my first cabinet shop was I was making 650 back then.
Oh
And my
shit.
goal was to make 10 to 12, and for 10 to 12 I could live on my own for sure. 650 you weren't living on your own.
No,
This would have been
no,
like
no.
1997, 98, but um
Jeez, man. Yeah, that's gnarly. That's super
yeah,
gnarly.
but that's what
Yeah.
I mean, they're, and I don't know that they're making much more these days, you know, if you're
No,
running a big shop and you just have finishers.
no. I mean, it's it's funny. Cabinet shops and woodworking generally is one of the industries that kind of hasn't inflated with the prices of everything. The
Yeah.
the salaries have kind of remained the same. They haven't really
Yeah.
grown at all.
I worked I worked at a small shop in Austin, Texas for a year, and there was a guy that was hired. He's probably my age, but he seemed a little older. But I mean, he was like a whiz, you know, like his brain, everything. I couldn't even imagine. And he left his previous job because they max out at $22 an hour there.
Mm,
And then I think he was making that at this shop as well. And like, but the max was going to be 25, you know, and this guy had more talent in his pinky than anybody I've ever met before. You know what I mean? Like, and it was such a deflating, you know, thing in regard to like an
yeah,
industry where I'm like, so like
yeah.
the more you know and the better you get, you're never going to be financially compensated for it.
No, you're
It's
not.
not like that where like you can go do most jobs and just kind of, you know, skate your way through it and just keep getting
Hmm.
those promotions and raises. It's such a bummer, but that's why if you're still doing it, that's why you do it, not for the money, but for the life of it, you know,
Yeah,
the passion of it.
yeah, for sure. And it stuck with me even after that little finisher job I had. That shop went under, and I finished for a couple other shops when I was younger, and I did a lot of live audio. So I'd work with bands and do the audio for different bands that came through town and everything.
Oh, right on.
That was a cool thing, but it was always either skateboarding, music, or woodworking. And after after the accident, I was I was working for a plastics and metal company and doing some fabrication with them, and I was like, man, I want to make a fucking guitar. So I ended up um in the course of trying to get back into the world, but I was always a finisher before. I was never much of a builder. I did a ton of finishing and painting and all that, and I met with this dude who owns a company up in Lake Tahoe called Finishing Touch Carpentry. His name's Alex Gonzalez, and the guy was one of the best woodworkers I've ever met, and I was very lucky enough to apprentice under him. Um, so I did that for several years until I started doing stuff on the side, and then things kind of got rocky there, and business was slow. And when Alex and I parted ways, I was like, all right, I'll just finish up my side stuff and I'll grab another job. Um, but then I just kept getting more work and more work and more work, and never really had to do the other job thing until just recently. And just recently, it wasn't even due to lack of work. My wife has so much going on that we figured it'd be safer for me to just get a part time. So half the time I do cabinets for a shop out here, and the other half the time I build furniture, and it's sick.
Yeah. I mean, I love that, dude. And that's the way to be, man. So you're not, as long as you know that your finances are set where part-time
Mm-hmm.
works, and you know, that's the beauty of having a partner in that scenario. And then you can just kind of build, for the love of it rather than for the dollar of it, you know, because
Yeah,
the
you
dollar's
don't get
nice if you
locked
can get
in.
some of that too at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah, certainly, it's good to not get locked into it. And I mean, my wife is doing so much. I mean, she's a professional makeup artist. She just worked with U2 and Ralph Lauren, and um, she does all the indigenous fashion shows that are happening out here on the West Coast. And she's also an archivist for the Reno Sparks Indian Colony, and she also does powwow stuff. She also um, makes custom balloons and things. She's so got so much shit going on. And I was like, I'll just get a part timer. I want to learn the cabinet industry a little bit better anyway. So I got in with a smaller shop out here, and it ended up working out great. And they're awesome. They're some of the best cabinet makers out there. We're doing all the stuff up in Tahoe, all the new developments out there, and just not a bad thing to be up at the lake in the summertime working.
Yeah, man. Well, listen, dude, like you came across my Instagram mainly because, as we discussed, but my gal's a Native American as well. I got her thing because they don't spell it right, but
Oh,
it's called she's yeah. They have there's a T in front of it, and it doesn't make any sense, but she's a Simshian, but they put a T in front of it.
oh yeah,
Uh, but so I saw that you were doing some, I don't know if it was classes or what you guys were doing for kids with
yeah,
woodworking, and it sounded like your wife was doing something. And so when you came across my page, I showed it to my gal, and I was like, we got to get to know this guy, and especially for Indigenous Peoples Month, this is a perfect time
yeah. It's awesome,
to
man.
talk. And you got a hell of a story, man. I mean, I hope you're out there speaking. I mean, you've literally lived 1,000 lives. The fact that you're now living your best life with still so many years ahead of you is pretty awesome, dude.
Yeah, it's crazy to have lived on both like polar sides of life. You know, I did the little rock star party thing. I did the worst parts of the rock star party thing. Uh,
Well, yeah, I think you did exactly what you're supposed to do with the rockstar
yeah,
party thing,
yeah,
like that's the story.
yeah. And I mean, luckily kind of burn out young. I didn't burn, it didn't last till my 50s, and then I
Yeah.
was able to kind of pull it together and have this rad family, and it's really great. My daughter's dance powwow, and we do all the powwows whether the girls dance or not because my wife has different tables and stuff. And now that uh, we did that big event down there in Southern California where um, it was like 60 kids. My wife did taught makeup and stuff for fashion, and our friend taught photography, and they kind of put together this little fashion show. And I taught the kids some woodworking stuff. And within that little realm, that's what is their name? The Native Youth Foundation is who we were working with. Um,
Okay.
but just prior to that, we had put in our paperwork for a 501c3 or 3C. I forget the thing, but it just recently got granted. So our thing, the um, All Nations Art Collective, is our nonprofit. Me,
So,
my
but you got
wife.
granted.
Yes, yeah, we got it. This
Congratulations.
just
That's awesome.
happened recently, and we're super excited about it. My wife and I, and our friend Veronica, who's a photographer, does great video work and photos. We're trying to connect with initially and primarily, not primarily, but initially all the kids on the reservations that are really rural and don't get a lot of opportunity to see their options. They're kind of pushed, it's obviously going to college and getting a great job and having that career is beautiful. And for anybody that works for, I suggest it through and through, certainly. But there's a lot of kids out there that aren't gonna roll that direction that easily. So
Hmm.
to help them and show them that there's lots of options out there to find a profession that one either they love and they do it for the passion and they can survive off of it, or find themselves in a career that can take them off the reservation to go learn and grow and bring all of that that richness and that education back to the place they grew up. They don't we
Yeah.
don't want them to think that they have to leave and go live amongst, people in the city and just forget where they came from. You can take all that stuff back home and help your community grow. And it's hard for kids because they really, on the reservations, they're so rural, and they kind of don't feel like they have any options. But now with the birth of social media, they don't even necessarily have to leave the reservation to make a living. They can either get into finance or content creation. There's so much stuff, and we have so many connections in the movie industry and the fashion industry and the the builders industry and woodworking, and uh, we think that we could really bring a lot to these kids and kind of give them a whole different perspective. On top of the fact that not only am I in recovery now for 7 years, but my wife is in recovery going on, I think, 10 years. So we have that to kind of level with the kids and be understanding of the situations that sadly most of them are in, which aren't
Yeah.
always
I
the
mean, you got
best.
the street cred now, and then you've learned the life lessons as well along the way, like, um, I don't think you guys probably have what to give, you have everything to give to these people that are in need, and maybe more importantly, people that don't even know they need at the moment yet, you can give, some inspiration.
That's what we're hoping. And now that we've kind of got our nonprofit granted, and we've made a lot of friends, and not just Reno, but in different states with all of the different fashion shows my wife has done. There's a lot of really cool shit that can come of it. And I'm gonna start
Yeah,
one of the things we're gonna do too. That's possibly part of the nonprofit, but I'm gonna start getting skate parks built on these really rural reservations,
I love
and
it.
having people come out and do demos with the kids and hook them up with some free gear, and that way they have something to do other than just getting in trouble.
Yeah. Well, and they can do both.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Then
yeah.
maybe
Get,
when a decision comes, they go to
moderate.
the good part at one point, but
Yeah, moderate. I mean, I think getting in trouble is just an important part of growing up as anything else, as long as you don't you know take your goofy ass too deep.
yeah, and one that's where you can come in and say, "Here's where the line is. Don't
Mm-hmm.
don't cross it. This is when
Yeah,
I should have stopped."
yeah. The shit
Yeah.
sucks. It sucks.
But then on the other end, look at you now. So people look like, it looks like I can just do everything you just did and turn out the way you did. So be sure to
I
teach
hope
that
so,
that's not the
man.
case. You're definitely an anomaly.
It's really 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 hard, and it's hard for people that um it's an alarming amount of people that have way too similar of a story as I do, that just haven't been able to kind of step over that line to kind of pull themselves out. And it's not it's not because they're weak or that things are better or worse or anything. It's just the fact that it's so fucking hard.
Yeah.
It it sucks on just about every level. And then if you get hurt on top of it, then you're dealing with the physical pain, understanding what you can and can't do. Um, I'm just with how I put 120% into being a drug addict. I took that same energy and put it into healing. So I've been able to start skating again and do all those normal things, but it's so hard. It's
Yeah.
really difficult for a lot of people to find that tenacity because it sucks.
Well, I mean, your drive definitely shifted gears, and it's awesome for you, but it sounds like it's going to be great for the people that are around you just the same.
I
I
really
hate to
hope
cut it
so.
short. Well, it's not short. It's long. It's an hour. Uh, but I don't want to miss any opportunity for you. I know you guys, as you just mentioned, do all these charitable events and things like that. If there's anything you
Yeah.
have coming up, or if there's a place where people can donate, if you have anything you want to get out there, I'd love to hear it and then share it.
Yeah, no, you could follow us on our socials for All Nations Art Collective, and that's going to be the nonprofit. And on Facebook, it's just All Nations Art Collective or ANAC. On Instagram, it's the same, and we have some stuff brewing, but just everybody's attention, and we want to connect with whoever has anything they want to connect with us about. And it doesn't just have to be primarily on the reservation. We want to work this out into a network where people are connecting in and out of the reservation. It's just as important. And my personal socials are Rosalie Woodworking on Instagram and Facebook, or Randal Randal um, on Facebook, and I believe that's about it. And I appreciate the hell out of you bringing me on. Your content is my it's one of my favorite bits of content on the internet, man. You're killing it. It's so
Oh, well,
goddamn
thank you very
funny.
much, dude.
It's funny and it's
If I
great
had you on
work.
for anything, it's that.
Yeah, well that's why I'm here. I just came to do that. All the other
Just
stuff I just said was all bullshit. I just
forget.
leading up to the compliment. It was a long
No,
fucking
thank you very
compliment.
much for saying that. No, I thank you, man. I appreciate you taking the time to be on here. I think you have a good story, and honestly, I don't even think we scratched the surface. So you got a supporter here, and I'll make sure we get the word out on everything that you're doing.
Right on, man. I appreciate it greatly.
Awesome, dude. Thank you.
And thank you.
If I had a 5-hour show, I think we could have gotten some pretty interesting stories out of Randall. But man, I don't know about you, but for me, I always find it inspiring that people can overcome such hardship, and it's easy to think about drug abuse as this selfish thing and you're doing it to yourself. But yeah, maybe it was a decision that you made to start taking the drugs. A lot of these opiate addictions in this country are not, your doctor is the one telling you to take it and now you're hooked. Um, but even if it's your decision, it's usually stemming from something else, and then once you made that one bad decision just because you weren't happy that day and you wanted to forget, now your body needs it, craves it, not happy if it doesn't have it. This is kind of one of those things I think about every time I'm bitching about my simple life. Anyways, hope you got something from it. Randal Randal's a dope dude. Out there just doing good work. So if you can, give him a follow on Instagram, give him some support. You'll be able to get updated on his next type of charity event. They accept donations now that he's got his own non-for-profit. And celebrate the remaining of November here for Indigenous Peoples Month. Don't forget it. Thanks for listening to the Happy Hour podcast with Streamline Woodshop, sponsored by no one. Until next time.